Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. How are you this morning? Hope you're doing great. Good morning. Good to see everyone this morning. We got another week. Hey, Donna, good morning to you. Grab my coffee. Hello, friends. Good morning to you. Good morning. Hey, Vicki, it is a gorgeous day. There is much beauty out there today. Hope you can get out and get in some of it. But kind of the heat's at bay. Got a little rain coming up, and I think in a few days ahead. So this is the day to enjoy it. As the psalmist says, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. All right. Let's get going this morning. Good morning. It is the 16th day of June here on this Tuesday where we begin another week. Welcome at 11:11. I'm glad you're here and a part of this journey. So, the Apostle Paul, he's a letter writer. We know this, right? Like we have all these letters from Paul to these different churches. And sometimes he's writing for happy reasons, but usually he's writing for not so happy reasons. That usually he is writing because there's a problem, and he's trying to help the church get along. Sometimes he's just encouraging them, and this is never more true than the church in Corinth. So the church in Corinth is probably kind of, if you have the least, your least favorite or your least, it's probably the church in Corinth for Paul. They have problems on top of problems. And he goes, and so he sends in his first letter, he sends some correctives. There's some particular issues they're dealing with. He kind of gives some instructions around these particular issues, and then he goes and visits them, and the visit goes poorly. There's all kinds of contention around his visit. There's all kind of questions about is Paul really the guy to lead this church? Shouldn't we have, aren't there's probably better, and not even just whether it's Paul or some other apostle, but even what authority figures should we be listening to? Should we be basically it's kind of, should we be listening to the news? Should we be listening to the local authorities? Should we be listening to the Romans? How much should we be like the people that are here in Corinth, the other Corinthians? And so the church is being, and at the same time, the church is really being persecuted. There are real there's real pressure on the church. So there's pressure from the inside. There's kind of failure on the inside. There's pressure on the outside. Paul decides to go visit them. It goes wrong. It is kind of this cataclysm of events. This everything is going wrong in Paul's world around the church in Corinth as he writes his second letter. And I just wanted to set all this context up because to read the parts of this second letter and to read the verse we're going to talk about today, you have to understand the context of this because it's not just regular instructions. These are not make sure you change your sheets weekly. it is not these kind of things that you think you should do or not do or just ways of getting by. This is a contention with kind of the comedy of errors that happens when things start to go wrong, and the way in which things unfold as they go wrong. And so, so I think, and because of that, there's a particular instruction in it. And I want to talk about today because, we're a little bit in this. I think, there's so much. We have so many blessings in our life, and life is so good in so many ways, and that had the potentiality of being so much worse. And at the same time, our little city has been dealing with some really bizarre and kind of this sense of like things kind of catapulting into wrongness. I think, if you've been following some of the recent violence that's been happening in the city, and just the really horrible nature of so much of it, there's this way of asking this question of like, okay, how are we to deal with this, or how are we to contend when things start to go wrong in our life, when we feel like things are not just challenging and not just lifey, but this kind of comedy of errors that will happen, the way things that kind of when they start to kind of come apart in our lives, that what are we to do with that? And Paul has there's these two verses that he gives that I think you could write a book in these two verses, like alone, in terms of how to contend with this. And so it's what I wanted to offer us today to think about. And this is it. So it's a long way to get to the introduction, huh? But it's important because otherwise it doesn't make sense. So these two, chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, gets us here. Where he says this. This is Paul's little letter to the Corinthians after this kind of rocky visit, trying to give them some strength and some courage to get through, and not just to get through, but also to restore some relationships with him and with others in the church and around. So he writes this, 2 Corinthians 4, 8 and 9. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. So if you look at this, there is this way in which Paul is not only describing kind of how things are going, but he's also permission giving in terms of how are we to interpret the hard things we have to encounter. How do we interpret? What are we to allow ourselves in misery, right? Because misery, I don't know about you, maybe you're different, but I know for me, my challenges and my misery can turn into a pity party really fast. I can get the party hats out and hang the black crepe and be like, oh, it's so hard, and I'm so, it's so bad, and I'm so bad, and this is so bad, and we can talk about all the things that are so bad, and we can just lay around and say things are so bad that the temptation to turn into a pity party is always available to us. But and so we have to guard against that. But at the same time, we have to encounter the things that are hard, and we have to encounter them in a way that is helpful, I think. And so I love this phrase because it's so tight, but it's so rich in what this is just classic Paul of just a couple of lines, but you can spend that it's just rich in trying to mine it for what it is. He says, okay, so how are we to be? He says we can be hard pressed, perplexed, persecuted, and struck down. These four things. This is a reality. This is and not just we can be this way, but this is how we should frame the challenges of our days. if we're contending with great losses, if we're trying to help people that are in crisis, if we're ourselves are in crisis, if we're sick, we're ill, we're being betrayed, we're dealing with the chaos of the world, we're dealing with real straight up evil that's trying to get us. Whatever it is, that is we can be hard pressed. Meaning, we're not supposed to be just happy clappy, our hearts filled with joys and rainbows, looking like one of the Care Bears with little rainbows shooting out of our hearts all the time. That's not a real stance for anybody who lives at any length of time. I mean, those times are nice, and we want those times, but we can be hard pressed, meaning that things can press against us, and we are called to stand. To be hard pressed does not mean we don't feel it. It doesn't mean we aren't challenged, but it does mean that that if the world presses against us, we hold what we got. Like, if I were ever to get a tattoo, never had one. If I were ever to get a tattoo, the tattoos I would get would be this. There is a old sailor's tattoo, and it is the sailors would hold up their knuckles, and across their knuckles would be two words, and they one on each knuckle. Then they were 8 letters, and it would be hold fast. And the old sailors, before there were all the windlasses and all the things, the old whalers, when they were out, they would get a whale, and then they'd have to hold on and go for the Nantucket sleigh ride. All the things and sometimes what it meant was holding the rope. What it meant was to hold fast. That was their greatest endeavor. And I think in life, so many times, we can be hard pressed. We can be hard pressed, and we can feel hard pressed. We're not. Our lives are not meant to be always. And that doesn't mean we will. But it does mean we hold. So the second thing we can be is perplexed. We cannot understand what's going on. We cannot understand why God is permitting something to happen in our life. That this is a way that often, because this is what I love about this idea of being perplexed, is because there's a natural curiosity in it. If we don't understand what's going on, what being perplexed does is open us. It opens us to the way in which God is working. And that we can be attentive to it. We can look for it. Like, Lord, I don't know what you're doing here. I don't know why this has happened to me. I don't know why there's violence in my city. I don't know why things are unfolding the way they are. I don't know why people I love are sick. I don't know why things are like. But what I do know is we can hold fast, and we can be perplexed. And that those are things that actually open us to the movement of the Spirit as close us down. The third thing that Paul says is that we can be persecuted. That we can understand there are forces arrayed against us that are coming for us. That part of spiritual warfare, part of being in the spiritual fight, is understanding that sometimes you will be in the sniper's crosshairs, and occasionally you'll take a bullet. You can be persecuted, and that I remember particular times in my life when I really felt this, and I really knew this was happening, and I remember. There was a movement of the Spirit that happened at the time, and it's it's something that I've always been able to call back on now because I went through that time. Now I know I've got something for that. Is that I can remember being persecuted, and I can remember, trying to do my best, trying to be in this fight, but I can remember there were actively people working against me in an active way. That I was in the crosshairs of something that wasn't trying to be helpful for me. And that persecution, but the word that came to me at the time was, if they hate you, remember they hated me first. Is to understand that if we are being persecuted, if in fact we find ourselves in the crosshairs of somebody trying to do diabolical things, or an institution trying to do diabolical things, or even just the chaos of the world seeming like it's always against us, we can in fact understand that Christ has encountered that and did overcome it. That Jesus knows knows that, and knows that that's the place to stand. that's actually a place that it can happen and it will happen, and to understand that it's not necessarily cause for a pity party, but it actually is cause to anchor better our identity in Christ. And the fourth thing is we can be struck down. We can be that, in fact, we can lose jobs. We can lose partners. We can lose health. We can lose things that there will be a way in which things get stripped away from us in life. That it is that contrary to what our friend Joel Osteen in our prosperity gospels, folks will say, there are in fact times in which we can be hurt and we can be broken and we can be set back, and that we can be struck down. And that doesn't mean we're unfaithful. That doesn't mean we're doing a bad job. That doesn't mean our prayer life is failing. That doesn't mean any of those things. It means that, in fact, sometimes the way through is backwards. Like sometimes things are being stripped away from us. But the things that are being stripped away, God can even use that. And I don't pretend to say how that's working itself out in your life. That's not my point. But to say that we can understand that because things are getting stripped away in our life doesn't mean we're failing, doesn't mean we're being unfaithful, doesn't mean we're losing even. It means that this is what it is to contend with hard things and be a part of the spiritual fight. And so those are the four things that Paul invites us into. That he invites us into these four things. That he says these are the ways to contend with the world that is pressing against us, with hard things that are working. And then the four that he says not to be. I'm not going to spend tons of time on this, but because I think in some ways they're apparent. But he says the four things is crushed, despair, abandoned, and destroyed. Do you see the difference? Do you hear the qualitative difference in what he says? This is the way to be. This is the way not to be. That we're not crushed. That we're not just laying on the ground, waiting for waiting to be picked up and destroyed. We're not in despair. I think the greatest enemy today is despair. Is to believing that we have no power, we have no ability to affect what's going on. That despair is a luxury. It's an indulgence that we cannot afford in the spiritual life. Like maybe you can afford to lay around and feel bad about yourself and feel like you're in despair. Maybe you have that kind of time. Maybe you have that kind of ability to put yourself in spiritual jeopardy, because that's what you're doing when you fall in despair. But it is a luxury. It's like sitting around eating bonbons all the time. Like we can feel good about our despair. It's a luxury we don't have time for. The third is abandoned. Because abandonment is a lie. We're never abandoned. Christ is always with us. And so to set our identity as we are abandoned is to lie about God's love for us. And the fourth is destroyed. Friends, you didn't make it. You can't kill it. You can't destroy it. Your soul, your being, your essence, the child of God that you were created and born into this world to be, and that will go on to eternity, the eternal child of God that you are, you did not create, and so thus you cannot destroy. And the idea that you are being destroyed, no. Are you being struck down? Maybe. Like maybe things are being taken away from you, maybe you're being struck down, but you're not being destroyed, and you can't be destroyed. And so to take that on your identity is again another lie. All of these things, friends, as we go through these days, I want to encourage you to think about, that not only did our ancestors go through hard things, not only is there hard things that we're going to contend with now and possibly in the future, but the reality of what Paul is telling us is that we're built for it. We are built to do hard things. We are built to be hard pressed, and not understand what's going on, and maybe have people coming after us, and maybe even lose some things along the way. But in all of it, the victory is already won in Christ. That Christ already has us, and that we are always, and that what the difference between the things we're invited to do and not do is the difference between staying in relationship with Him and breaking relationship with him. And basically listening to the lie that the devils would tell us about how he has abandoned us or he's leaving us to be destroyed, and that there's no point in trying anyway, and that you are already under the heel of the powers that would destroy you. Those are all lies, friends. And my hope for you is you'll step into the truth of your identity as a child of God, made in the image of God, born and to bear and hard things in hard times, because the victory has already been won. Peace and grace to you all, my friends, and just want to say hi to everybody. Hey, Donna, good morning. Vicky, good morning to you. Glad you're here. Deb, welcome. So glad you're here. Karen, good morning. Beth, how are you? Blessings to you, dear one. Please, as all in this time, our dear friend Fannie Faye Davis is struggling. Things are getting hard for her, so please hold her in your prayers as well in your days ahead. Peace and grace to you all, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.